How can we sing when we're in a strange land? How can we face adversity? Oh, how can we stand in the midst of trouble when the enemy laughs at our beliefs?
Please help me welcome Rosa Parks.
Thank you, Faye. It's nice to be here.
You're most famous for a very fateful bus ride, and I want to hear all about that day. But before that, why don't you tell us about the world you grew up in?
I was born in 1913 and grew up in and around Montgomery, Alabama, during the Jim Crow days. Jim Crow was a system of segregation laws and an unwritten code about how black people were to be treated in the South. Blacks went to different schools, ate in different restaurants, and drank from separate water fountains. We also had to sit in different parts of buses and trains.
Segregation laws were only part of the problem, right?
That's right. There were also terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan that targeted black people. By the time I was 6, the Klan was riding through the black community, burning churches, beating people, and murdering. My grandfather told us to go to bed with our clothes on. That way, if the Klan broke into our house, we would be ready to run and get out fast.
That must have been really scary. And back then it wasn't easy for black people to vote for better conditions.
The white people in charge made it difficult for blacks to vote. They made us take ridiculous tests, guess the number of jelly beans in a jar, things like that, before we could vote. They also charged a fee for voting, and most blacks were too poor to pay. Not being able to vote meant we couldn't elect leaders who would work to change the system. We had to change it ourselves.
Did you start by refusing to move to the back of the bus?
Well, that's what I was best known for, and it was a very important incident. But it wasn't how I started. By the 1950s, I had been working for years with civil rights groups that were trying to make sure blacks could vote. I also helped raise money for the legal defense of people who were arrested for resisting Jim Crow laws. Of course, I became one of those people.
Tell us more about that day on the bus.
It was December 1st, 1955. At that point, blacks had not demanded that buses be desegregated. We had just asked to be treated with more respect. I was on my way home from work as a seamstress for a department store. I took a seat just behind the whites-only section of the bus. But when the bus got too full of white people, the bus driver told me to move further back so a white man could have my seat. I just sat there. He shouted at me and told me to move. I said no. Then he told me he would have me arrested. I said, "You can do that."
That was so brave.
Well, other black people had refused to give up their seats for whites before. I had done it before. But they usually just threw us off the bus. When this driver said he would have me arrested, I knew that if I let them take me to jail, we might be able to build a movement around this. And we did. The local black...
That day, when the bus driver asked me to get up, I had this feeling come over me. It felt like Harriet Tubman was holding me down, hands were holding me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth hands were holding me down on another shoulder. And I was glued to the seat, and I could hear the white passioners saying, "She gotta move, she gotta move, that's the law, she gotta move." And I felt like this is my time to take a stand for justice. My name is Claudette Colvin, and in 1955, I refused to give up my seat to a white passenger on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, 9 months before Rosa Parks. I was 15 years old. And the rule and the segregation that a white person had to sit in front of you and you sit behind them. And so the bus driver asked me to get up. I was shouting, "It's my constitutional right, so I'm not gonna move." And that's when the policeman dragged me off the bus. Most people ask me, "Weren't you afraid?" Well, I was a teenager. I was afraid, but I was more angry at these white passengers. And then they took me and booked me. I still vividly can hear the sound of the key go, "Click, click." And I was terrified, and I started reciting the Lord's Prayer. "Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven." And I was just praying for help, praying that they would go and let my parents know that I was in jail. My mom would say, "Yeah, Claudette, I think you was anointed by God to do this." I said, "I don't think so, Mom. I just felt that this was not right. I just wanted people to come together and unify and fight this segregation."